Hey guys! Tonight we slip quietly through a narrow Roman street at dusk, where the last light clings to stone walls and the smell of baked bread drifts lazily past you. You pause outside a tavern. Nothing grand, just a low doorway and a flickering oil lamp, and already you can hear the soft murmur of voices inside. You step in, and the air changes immediately. Warm, a little smoky, and filled with that unmistakable mix of wine, herbs, and humanity. It's cozy in the way a place can be when nobody has opened a window in a while. You probably won't survive this without at least one questionable cup of watered wine, but honestly, that's part of the charm. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, I'd love to know where you are and what time it is there right now. There's something oddly comforting about knowing we're all drifting off together, just in different corners of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You take a few careful steps across the worn floor, your sandals sticking ever so slightly as if the wood remembers every spill it has ever endured. Taverns like this, called popine, are common across Rome, small places where ordinary people gather for cheap food, diluted wine, and a bit of conversation at the end of a long day. Senators and elites like to pretend they never come here, but historians agree they absolutely do, usually disguised and hoping nobody notices them ordering the same lentil stew as everyone else. A bench creaks as you sit, and your eyes adjust to the low light. Clay cups clink softly. Someone laughs in the corner. A vendor mutters about grain prices as if the entire empire hinges on his opinion. And then, just beyond the main cluster of patrons, you notice him. He sits slightly apart near the wall where the shadows are kind. A man with dark, sun-warmed skin and calm, steady hands, holding a lyre across his lap. Not the kind you might see in a grand performance hall. This one is simpler, travel-worn, its wooden frame smoothed by years of use. He leans close to it, head tilted, gently plucking a string and turning a peg with slow precision. You don't hear music yet, not quite, just quiet adjustments, a soft twang, then another, like someone speaking in whispers to the instrument, asking it to remember its voice. The presence of a Nubian musician here is not as unusual as it might seem. Rome, at its height, is a vast crossroads of cultures. Nubia, south of Egypt along the Nile, is known for its rich musical traditions, and trade between these regions is well established. Ivory, gold, exotic animals, and yes, people, all move along these routes. Some come as merchants, others as performers, and some, historians still argue whether by choice or necessity, find themselves weaving new lives far from home. You shift slightly, pretending not to stare, but it's hard to notice the quiet focus in his posture. Around you, the tavern continues its gentle hum. A woman nearby tears bread into careful pieces, dipping each one in oil as if it's a ritual. Someone else snores lightly against the wall. Impressive, really, given the noise. And above it all, the faintest thread of sound begins to form. One string, now tuned, sings a soft, low note. Then another joins it, slightly higher. The musician pauses, listening, adjusting again. It's almost hypnotic, this slow preparation. No rush, no performance anxiety, just patience. You realize that in a place built for chatter and clatter, this quiet moment feels almost sacred. A man across the room leans to his companion and whispers, "If he plays too softly, I might accidentally relax." The companion nods solemnly, as if this is a genuine concern. Historians still argue whether music in places like this was meant as background ambiance or if it held a more central role in social life. But right now, it feels like something in between, a gentle thread tying the room together. You adjust your seat, letting the bench settle beneath you, and for a moment, You forget the dust of the street, the long day, even the slightly suspicious smell coming from the kitchen. All your attention drifts toward that corner where the musician lifts his hand once more, ready to test the next note. And without quite realizing it, you begin to settle into the rhythm of this place, as if the evening itself is tuning you, string
You
by
lean
string.
just slightly closer, not enough to intrude, but enough to catch the quiet rhythm of his tuning. The lyre rests comfortably against his chest now, and his fingers move with a kind of practiced ease that suggests years, maybe decades of repetition. He plucks, listens, adjusts. It's unhurried, almost meditative, like he has nowhere else to be and no reason to rush time forward. At some point, he notices you noticing him. His eyes lift, calm and steady, and for a brief second you wonder if you've broken some unspoken rule of tavern etiquette. Perhaps there's a strict no staring at traveling musicians policy you somehow missed. But instead of annoyance, there's a small, knowing smile. Not wide, not performative, just enough to acknowledge that yes, you're both here, sharing this same quiet pocket of evening. You listen, he says softly, his Latin carrying a gentle accent shaped by distant lands. You nod, because it feels like the correct answer, also because saying, "I was absolutely staring," might ruin the moment. He tilts the lyre slightly, adjusting the tension of a string. "Good," he adds. "Most only here." It's the kind of sentence that sounds simple, but lingers a little longer than expected, like a note that refuses to fade. You shift on the bench, oddly determined now to live up to this unexpected compliment. He gestures faintly to the empty space beside him, not an invitation exactly, more like a possibility. You take it. Up close, the instrument shows its history. The wood is worn smooth where fingers have rested again and again, and faint markings run along the frame, small carvings, perhaps made during long journeys. Historians know that lyres were common across the ancient Mediterranean, but styles varied widely, and Nubian instruments often carried distinct shapes and tonal qualities. Some scholars suggest these differences reflect deeper musical systems, while others argue it's simply a matter of available materials and local taste. Either way, this one feels personal, like it belongs to him in a way that goes beyond ownership. "You travel far?" you ask, keeping your voice low to match his. He nods once. "From the south, along the Nile first, then ships, then roads that never seem to end." You can almost picture it, the long ribbon of the Nile cutting through the landscape, the slow movement of boats loaded with goods, the endless rhythm of footsteps on dusty roads. Trade routes connecting Nubia, Egypt, and Rome are well established by this time, carrying not just objects, but stories, languages, and music. It's a vast network, though not always an easy one. Bandits, storms, and bureaucrats with very strong opinions about paperwork all make appearances along the way. He plucks a string again, this time letting it ring a little longer. The note hums softly between you. "In my home, music is how we remember." He pauses, searching for the right word. "Not just stories, people." That lands gently, but firmly. You glance around the tavern, the laughing group in the corner, the sleepy man still somehow asleep despite everything, the woman now meticulously aligning olive pits in a neat little row like it's a competitive sport. Everyone here has a story, you realize. Most of them will never be written down. A small joke escapes you before you can stop it. "So if I forget something, I just need a lyre?" He considers this very seriously for a moment, then shakes his head. "No, then you need better memory." Fair enough. Historians still argue whether Nubian musical traditions directly influenced Roman practices, or if the exchange was more subtle, filtered through layers of Greek and Egyptian culture. But sitting here, it doesn't feel like a debate. It feels immediate, human, one person sharing something with another, no footnotes required. He adjusts another string, then lightly taps the frame. "This one," he says, nodding toward a slightly darker section of wood, "came from a tree near the second cataract." He watches your expression, perhaps gauging whether that means anything to you. You nod confidently, as if you are extremely familiar with cataracts of all kinds. Inside, you are mostly thinking, ah yes, the second watery thing. He smiles faintly, possibly aware of your enthusiastic bluff. A server passes by, setting down a small cup near you without asking. The wine inside is diluted, as expected, but not unpleasant. In fact, it's oddly refreshing. Roman taverns often watered their wine both to stretch supplies and to make it safer to drink than questionable water sources. You take a cautious sip. It tastes like grapes that have been politely introduced to water and decided to get along. The musician listens to the ambient noise for a moment, the shifting conversations, the low crackle of a lamp, the distant sound of someone arguing about fish prices outside. Then he plucks a short sequence of notes, not just testing the instrument, but the room itself. Every place sounds different, even silence. You glance around again, noticing how the walls seem to absorb some sounds while others bounce softly back. It's not perfect acoustics, but it's alive in its own way. And Rome, you ask? He pauses, fingers resting lightly on the strings. Rome listens loudly, he replies. You're not entirely sure what that means, but it feels accurate. He shifts slightly, settling the lyre more firmly into position. The tuning is nearly done now. The scattered notes are beginning to align, forming something cohesive, something ready. You find yourself leaning in just a little more, as if the next sound might carry you far beyond this small, dim tavern. And for the first time tonight, the room seems to lean with you.
The first full note arrives so gently you almost miss it. It doesn't announce itself. It simply appears, soft, steady, like a breath you didn't realize you were holding. The musician's fingers move with quiet confidence now, no longer adjusting, but guiding, and the lyre begins to speak in a way that feels less like performance and more like conversation. Around you, the tavern shifts. Not dramatically, no one gasps or drops their cup in awe, but subtly, like a room collectively remembering how to relax. The man arguing about grain prices lowers his voice. The woman aligning olive pits pauses mid-row, as if reconsidering her strategy. Even the snoring man, well, he continues snoring, but somehow more rhythmically, which feels like progress. You notice the pattern first. The melody isn't rushed. It loops gently, each phrase returning like a familiar path. Ancient music, as historians understand it, often relied on repetition and modal scales rather than the complex harmonies you might expect today. There's a structure here, but it's spacious, leaving room for the air itself to participate. He plucks a lower string, then answers it with a higher one. Call and response, question and reply. It's almost like listening to a quiet debate, though thankfully without anyone interrupting each other, which already makes it more civil than most arguments in this tavern. You take another sip of your watered wine, and this time you don't even question it. It just fits. The sound, the dim light, the low murmur of voices, it all blends together into something unexpectedly soothing. A man nearby leans back against the wall and closes his eyes. If he keeps playing like this, he mutters, I might forgive my neighbor for stealing my sandals. Almost. That earns a soft chuckle from someone else, but even laughter feels quieter now, like it's been wrapped in cloth. The musician's hands move in small, precise motions. You can see the calluses on his fingers, the result of years spent coaxing sound from strings. In Nubian traditions, music often accompanies storytelling, rituals, and daily life, and instruments like the lyre or harp were central to that experience. Some scholars suggest that these performances were deeply tied to memory and oral history, preserving lineages and events through sound rather than text.
Historians still argue whether the specific tuning systems used in Nubia differed significantly from those in Greece and Rome, or if travelers like this musician adapted their style depending on the audience. Listening now, it feels like a blend, something shaped by many places but belonging fully to none. You find your breathing slowing, almost matching the tempo. Inhale as the note rises, exhale as it fades. It's not something you decide to do, it just happens. Your shoulders drop slightly, tension you didn't notice before quietly slipping away. Another sequence begins, this one a little brighter, not cheerful exactly, but lighter, like the moment just before sunrise when the world hasn't fully woken up yet. He glances at you briefly, as if checking whether you're still listening. You are, very much so. A small group at the far table starts tapping their fingers against the wood, not in a disruptive way, just a soft accompaniment. The rhythm is uneven at first. Someone is clearly more enthusiastic than coordinated, but it settles after a moment. The tavern, in its own imperfect way, becomes part of the music. There's something oddly modern about it, you think. Not the sound itself, but the feeling, like background music in a cafe, except instead of someone typing on a tablet, you have a man carefully negotiating with a piece of bread that refuses to tear evenly. Different centuries, same quiet struggles. The musician shifts into a slower passage, letting each note linger longer. The room seems to stretch with it, time softening at the edges. Oil lamps flicker gently, their light catching on the curves of the lyre. You notice now that some of the carvings on the instrument seem to align with the rhythm, small notches and patterns that might mark songs or memories. Or maybe they're just decorative. Historians still debate whether such markings held musical significance or simply personal expressions of the maker. Either way, they add to the sense that this instrument carries more than just sound. A server moves quietly between tables, placing dishes with unusual care, as if afraid to disturb the atmosphere. Even the kitchen noise has softened, reduced to a distant, comforting clatter. You realize, with a small internal laugh, that this might be the calmest Roman tavern in existence. Somewhere, surely, there's another one where someone is loudly singing about fish while knocking over a chair. But not here, not tonight. The melody dips again, returning to that original phrase you heard at the beginning, familiar now, grounding. You feel it settle somewhere behind your eyes, that gentle repetition, like a lullaby you didn't know you needed. And as the notes continue to weave through the room, you begin to understand what he meant earlier. This isn't just music. It's a way of holding the moment still, just long enough for you to rest inside it.
The melody continues, but now it feels as though it's carrying something more than sound. Something layered beneath it, like a story just out of reach. You shift slightly, resting your back against the wall beside him, and for a moment, neither of you speaks. The music fills that space comfortably, as if words would only get in the way. Then, between phrases, he murmurs, "In Nubia, this would not be so quiet." You glance at him, curious. Music there. He searches again. It walks with people, in the fields, at the river, at weddings. Even when no one plays, it is still there. You imagine it, the rhythm of daily life accompanied by sound, not as a performance, but as something woven into existence itself. In contrast, Roman taverns like this often treat music as an addition, a pleasant layer on top of food, drink, and conversation. But here, tonight, it feels closer to what he describes, something shared rather than displayed. He adjusts his posture slightly and shifts into a new sequence, one that feels older somehow. The notes stretch wider, the pauses longer, like the spaces between them matter just as much as the sound. "This one," he says quietly, "is for remembering a journey." That catches your attention. Trade between Nubia and Rome is not just about goods, it's about movement, identity, and adaptation. Nubia itself, known for powerful kingdoms like Kush, has a long and complex relationship with Egypt and later Rome. At times allies, at times rivals, these regions exchange far more than material wealth. Art, religion, and music flow along the Nile just as surely as boats do. Historians still argue whether Nubian musicians in Rome maintained their original traditions fully or blended them to suit Roman tastes. Listening now, it feels like both could be true at once. You glance at his instrument again. "Did you learn this from your family?" you ask. He nods once, plucking a low, resonant string. "From my father and his mother before him." A faint smile appears. "She was better." That earns a quiet laugh from you. "They always are, aren't they?" "Yes," he replies simply, as if this is an undeniable universal law. The melody shifts again, introducing a subtle rhythm that feels almost like footsteps. You can almost picture a caravan moving slowly along the Nile, the steady pace of travel marked by sound. It's not hard to imagine how music like this could help measure time, distance, even memory. A man across the room leans toward another and whispers, "If I walked that slowly, I'd never get anywhere." The other man shrugs. Maybe that's the point. You hide a small smile. Even here, philosophy sneaks in through the side door. The musician's fingers pause briefly on the strings. "Romans," he says, not unkindly, "they like things organized." You glance around at the tavern, the scattered cups, the uneven tables, the man now using a loaf of bread as a pillow, and raise an eyebrow. "Are you sure about that?" He follows your gaze, then chuckles softly. "Not here, but in their minds." He's not wrong. Roman society is famously structured. Laws, ranks, systems of governance that stretch across an enormous empire. Even music, in more formal settings, often follows specific rules and expectations. But here, in this small tavern, those structures seem to loosen just enough to let something else in. You think about the lyre itself. In Roman culture, it's often associated with education and refinement, taught to young boys as part of their upbringing. But this instrument, in his hands, feels different, less about status, more about connection. Historians still debate whether the Roman version of the lyre evolved significantly from earlier Greek designs or remained largely symbolic. But looking at his instrument, with its subtle carvings and worn edges, it's clear that whatever its origins, it has become something deeply personal. He taps lightly on the frame again, almost absent-mindedly. This one has crossed deserts and water and places where people do not ask questions. You consider that for a moment. There's a whole world behind that sentence, one that doesn't quite fit into the calm, safe bubble of this tavern. Do you miss it? He doesn't answer right away. Instead, he plays a short sequence, soft, almost hesitant, then another more certain. "Yes," he says finally, "but music," he gestures slightly with the head toward the lyre, "it remembers for me." That idea settles over you gently, the notion that sound can carry memory across distance, across time, even across change. The tavern feels quieter now, though you're not sure if that's real or just your perception shifting. The rhythm of the music has slowed further, each note placed carefully, like stepping stones. You notice the oil lamps burning lower, their light softer, more golden. Conversations have dwindled to murmurs. Even the man with the bread pillow has adjusted into a more committed sleeping position, which feels like a strong endorsement of the evening's ambiance. The musician glances at you once more, just briefly, as if to confirm that you're still there, still listening. You are. And as the melody continues, you realize that you're not just hearing his journey anymore. In some quiet, unexpected way, you're beginning to feel like
The
part of
melody
it.
softens further, almost dissolving into the warm air of the tavern, as if it's gently folding itself away for the night. You don't notice exactly when the final structured phrase ends. There's no clear boundary, no dramatic conclusion, just a gradual easing, like footsteps slowing after a long journey. Around you, the tavern has changed. Not in appearance, the same worn tables, the same flickering lamps, but in feeling. Conversations have quieted into soft murmurs, some barely more than breaths. A few patrons have drifted into sleep where they sit, heads resting on folded arms or tilted gently against the wall. Even the ever-determined olive pit organizer has given up halfway through a final row, her neat system abandoned in favor of rest. The musician's hands remain on the lyre, fingers resting lightly against the strings, as if listening for something only he can hear. Then, almost absent-mindedly, he plucks one last note. It lingers and fades. You exhale slowly, only now realizing how still you've been. It feels like the room itself exhales with you, a shared, quiet release. "No applause," he says softly, with the faintest hint of humor. You glance around. He's right. There's no clapping, no cheers, just a kind of collective understanding that the moment doesn't need to be broken apart and celebrated. It's already complete. Do they always listen like this? You ask. He considers the question. Not always, he admits. Sometimes they talk, sometimes they argue, sometimes someone sings very loudly and very badly. You nod, imagining it. Honestly, that feels more like the Rome you expected. But tonight, he adds, looking around the room, they are tired. That makes sense. This is a city of constant motion. Trade, politics, construction, ambition. Even rest here feels like something people have to remember to do. Historians often describe Roman daily life as bustling and demanding, especially for the working classes. Taverns like this offer a rare pause, a place to sit, eat, drink, and briefly step out of the rhythm of labor. And occasionally, if the evening is just right, they offer something more. You glance at the lyre again. Will you stay in Rome long? He shakes his head gently. A little while, then north maybe, or back south. A small shrug follows. The road decides. There's something comforting in that uncertainty. No fixed schedule, no rigid plan, just movement guided by opportunity, necessity, and perhaps a bit of curiosity. A faint breeze slips through the doorway, stirring the edge of your tunic. Outside, the street has grown quieter, the last traces of daylight long gone. Somewhere in the distance, a cart rolls slowly over stone, its wheels echoing softly. You realize how late it must be. The musician begins to adjust the strings again, not to tune them this time, but to loosen them slightly, easing the tension after playing. It's a small, careful ritual, one that suggests respect for the instrument, not just as a tool, but as something that has shared the work of the evening. You should rest, he says, not unkindly. You nod, though you're not entirely sure when that decision was made. At some point, the idea of leaving stopped feeling like an interruption and started feeling like a natural next step. You stand slowly, the bench creaking in quiet protest, and take one last look at the room. The soft light, the scattered cups, the gentle stillness, it all feels suspended, like a moment preserved. "Thank you," you say, and mean it. He inclines his head slightly. You listened. It's the same word he used before, but now it carries more weight. You nod, unsure how else to respond. As you step toward the door, you pause briefly, glancing back. He's already settled into stillness again, the lyre resting across his lap, his presence blending once more into the quiet corner where you first saw him. Outside, the night air is cooler, fresher. The sounds of the tavern fade behind you, replaced by the distant hush of the city at rest. You take a slow breath, letting it fill your chest, and begin to walk. And as you move through the dim street, something lingers, not just the memory of the music, but the feeling of it. Soft, repeating, familiar, like something your mind can rest against without effort. You imagine the musician again, sitting in that quiet corner, gently loosening the strings, letting the instrument rest, just as the room has. Perhaps he's closed his eyes by now. Perhaps the tavern has fallen completely silent, save for the quiet breathing of those who stayed. And you realize that the journey hasn't really ended. It's simply slowed, settling into something quieter, something softer. Your kotubos, your footsteps, grow lighter, quieter, as if even they don't want to disturb the stillness. The night wraps gently around you, not cold, not empty, but calm and patient. There's nothing more to follow, nothing more to figure out, just the soft echo of a final note, fading slowly into rest.